Welcome to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. We want to encourage, equip, and connect those with a passion to impact the next generation for Jesus Christ. Student ministry can be a lonely place. You might even feel like you're the only one in your church or community that cares about students. Well, know this, you're not alone. People all across the country are engaging Gen Z and care deeply about the spiritual direction of these young men and women. Whether you're full-time, part-time, bivocational, or volunteer, if you have a heart for students, this is the place for you.
Welcome to Student Ministry Matters. My name is Dan Carson, and I'm thrilled that you've chosen to join us for today's conversation about student ministry. Now, in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about Christian conferences, and specifically about a conference put on by the Baptist Missionary Association of America called SOAR 2020. Now, with me today is Chris Vines, and in addition to being one of our co-hosts, Chris serves as the visionary leader for the SOAR conference. And so, Chris, thank you for joining me for today's conversation.
It's great to be here, Dan.
Well, before we get to our topic, as we start many of our podcasts with, I want to start with our random question of the week. And again, it gives us a chance to share a little bit about ourselves. And so I'm going to ask this question. I'm kind of putting Chris on the spot, so I'm going to give him a minute to think about it. But as an adult, what is your favorite conference that you've attended? For me, recently, I've had the chance to go to the Sing conference put on by Keith and Kristen Getty. It's in Nashville. I go, and a lot of times you think, well, it's just going to be about music. But man, it's about deep theology. I learned some things about why we should all be singing. I love it. I've gone for 3 years. Chris's pastor, Cliff Johnson, has attended the Sing conference. I ran into him last year there. Just fantastic. In addition, you get incredible music. And so it's one that I've loved. How about you, Chris?
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, I've never been to the Sing conference. I would love to go. Cliff, as you said, he has gone, and he's always scheduled me to preach when he goes. So I haven't been able to go. But I love to preach, so I'm thankful for those opportunities. I would say most recently, the conference that I've just enjoyed the most has been the Cross Conference in Louisville. That happened actually a year ago, and that's I haven't gone to many conferences since then, other than SOAR and a couple of others. But I'd say the Cross Conference, it was just so well done as far as just beginning to end with a very clear purpose and trajectory, and I just enjoyed it. Focused on really just are you a sender or are you a goer in terms of just how we play a part in the mission of God. So I thought it was a really, really great conference.
Cool. Well, let me ask this. I know for me, I've attended a few youth leader conferences, things that I can learn from, that I can grow in. I haven't been to many of them, honestly, because they're where we're located in Arkansas. There's not a whole lot around here. We have to usually drive to Dallas or Nashville or fly even further. And so I've been to a few. One of the great ones that I've attended is the Youth Pastor Summit. It's in Dallas. It's a day and a half little event that's put on, and it's really cheap. You pay like $10, $15. Up until just recently, it was free, but they finally decided they need to charge a little something. So can you think of a youth pastor, a youth ministry conference that you've been to or that you've experienced?
Oh, man, Dan, I haven't been to just a lot. I would say there was one conference that we went to a couple of years ago, and it was a one-day conference in West Palm Beach, Florida, put on by Family Church. And it was called Sharper Conference. And that was really beneficial for us because of just really the heart of that church down there. They did a great job. Pastor Jimmy Scroggins is the lead pastor there, and just have a really cool church in South Florida. And they did this conference, and it's basically the tagline is "Church for the rest of us." And their heart behind it was simply to provide a very meaningful one-day experience for pastors of regular sized churches, and to really equip them and to give them resources while they're there, and then an ongoing pool of resources after they leave. And so I benefited from it because they had their breakouts and different learning sessions by pastoral roles, and so I was able to get close to their student ministry and see how they function, and just really come away with some good ideas, and just was really encouraged by it. So I would say the Sharper Conference was really helpful for me.
Great. One of the things that I encourage our listeners to do is join our Facebook group. There is a Student Ministry Matters community. You have to apply for that one. You have to answer some questions, and then we will accept you into that. But the reason for that is so that we can discuss some things there. We keep the conversations private. One of the things that we can do is to share. If we've gone to a good conference, be sure to share that information with other youth pastors, other youth workers, and it can cover any variety of things. Now, youth pastors, we have a more limited thing, but don't just limit yourself to student ministry leader conferences. Go out there, learn about worship, learn about theology, serving in the normative sized church, whatever it is. Be a lifelong learner. We've talked about that before, about this idea of needing to read, to grow. Take advantage of those things. Hopefully your church can send you. But I know with some of our listeners, they're bivocational or they're part-time. They can't get away from work to do these things. And we're going to be talking in the coming weeks about a podcast, or not a podcast, but a conference that Student Ministry Matters puts on that can help student ministry leaders and student ministry workers. And so we just want to encourage you to be listening for that. And you can find out more information at our website, studentministrymatters.com. But today's conversation is about Christian conferences and the student, how that is beneficial to them, how that works in their lives. And then specifically, we're going to hear from Chris as he shares a little bit about the SOAR conference and how that can be something of use to you. So let's begin with this question. What is the value in Christian conferences for students? They're big, they're loud, they are brief as you look at those things, but I feel like they have value. Chris, I know as we were talking before we started recording, you do too. Share some of those things.
Yeah. I think the value of a conference, when I think about from a student pastor perspective, because I am one, why, and answer the question of why I would take my kids or a group of my kids to a conference, I would say it's because I want them to be exposed to very focused teaching on a particular subject, or knowing that there's going to be a particular speaker there that I just really want my kids to hear from. I think that is all motivation for why I would go. Usually conferences are located in more metropolitan areas, and so that adds a little bit different dynamic, than say like going to camp or something like that. And Dan, I said this to you. I don't know if it communicates well to others, but it's just the way it kind of hit my brain. Is a conference is a lot like a fast-paced roller coaster. I'm thinking specifically of Rock and Roller Coaster at Disney World. You get in your seat and man, you better hang on because it's 60 miles an hour from the get-go all the way to the end. It's just high impact. Like you said, they're loud. There's a lot of information. And I think those kind of settings do our teenagers a lot of good whenever they're just exposed to a lot of good teaching in a short amount of time. I believe that's a really big benefit for them and for our student ministries.
Well, I know you also talked about how that varies and how that compares to, say, a camp experience. And we've talked about camps before. We see a lot of value in taking our groups to church camp. We love them.
Yep.
But there is a big difference. You talked about a roller coaster for a conference. How did you describe camp?
Yeah, I think of camp more like the log ride. It takes a little bit longer to develop. It's got a steady flow to it. There's scenery and just good things along the way. But you know that as a youth pastor and also as a student, you know that there's going to come a point in that camp setting where there's going to be a very climactic event, and you just kind of get ready for that. So it's all just kind of anticipating that big call, coupled with great teaching and community and all that kind of thing. I think that's the way I think about it. Again, it may not communicate to everybody else, but that's how I view camp.
No, I think that's a great way to look at it, because when we go to a conference, there's a lot that happens. I see a lot of value in us spending some time with our students. There's so many sides to that process. One of the things that I love about a conference is usually you're going somewhere to get there, and you are going as a group. So there's that travel experience.
Yeah.
I know that I've had some good trips. I've had some bad trips, some scary trips. When it was my birthday, it falls around the same time as we'd leave for the conference that we're going to talk about today. And so one of the students decided, I'm going to get him a Nerf gun. And so they love that. In fact, I wouldn't suggest this, don't recommend this by any stretch, but we had a Nerf gun fight in our 15-passenger van on the way to SOAR.
Wow.
Because the kids said, hey, when we stopped halfway through, I got to get me a Nerf gun so I can fight too. And it just got worse and worse. Luckily, I wasn't driving.
That's what.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that.
It is important. But during that trip, there was a lot of community built. Yeah. And it spilled over to our time in the hotel. Mm-hmm. And those things will help carry you through the school year when you are just barely seeing each other on a Wednesday night, or you're just touching base very briefly and maybe a text. You've got that shared experience. Mm-hmm. And so I love those things. I love the opportunities that it brings. But in addition, when you're going to a conference, at least for most of us, many listening are in smaller or more normative sized churches, and we don't have large youth budgets. So we have to maybe raise funds in that process. And so again, not only do you have the fellowship aspect on the trip itself, you have an opportunity to grow together as a group as you're working towards that end goal. We want to go to this because it's awesome. It's fun. There's great music, there's excitement. And so they build and they work together and they build up their funds, and then boom, they can go. And it's everybody has that opportunity. And so, there's a lot of value to taking a group of students to a conference. I love some of the things that you said, Chris, about the speakers. You hear of a speaker that you want your students to hear from. And the reason that sticks out to me is because I've taken students to conferences. I have said the exact same thing to them 100 times on Wednesday nights. They get to the conference, the speaker stands on the stage, says that thing, and then the student after, did you hear him? He was awesome. He told me this. And it's like, I've said that 100 times, man. But, you don't say that to your students. You just enjoy it, and because they're getting it.
That's right.
And it's pretty fantastic. Well, Christian conferences are important. I think that as a part of our student ministries, if you can figure out a way to make them happen, and they don't have to be an annual event, but man, every other year, every 3 years, make them a big deal. If you can go every year and make it a part, then you can work with what is being taught and the rotation, and some of those things can become a part of your student ministry. There's just a lot of value in that. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the SOAR conference. SOAR conference has been around our churches just been around for a long time now. Chris and I were talking about it before the podcast began, and I'm going to let him share some of the details, but it's been around since the early 90s. My wife was a part of those first events. She was one of the musical guests, and she's not a famous person by any stretch. She was a part of the Temple Baptist Church of Little Rock, their youth choir. And so she sang on stage as a part of that first SOAR conference.
That's cool.
But we celebrated, the 25th SOAR at 2015. And so we're going to be gearing up for another kind of 5-year mark soon. But Chris, what is SOAR? And just share a little bit of the history that you know of.
Yeah. Well, Dan, it's, SOAR, like you said, started back in the early 90s by some people that some of us will know, some of us may not, but Bobby Tucker and Donnie Parrish were two of the main guys who just started SOAR. And it came, my understanding, just from their heart of wanting there to be a big gathering of teenagers for our association of churches. And so they put this thing together, and SOAR stands for Sold Out and Radical. And like you said, for almost 30 years now, SOAR has been going strong during the summer. It happens each year right around the 4th of July. And like this year, it's going to be July 1st through the 3rd. It started out with, I believe there were somewhere around 500, maybe 600 people at the first SOAR, which is really amazing. And we have seen it peak, I think, all the way to like 2,500. And so, man, it's just really cool to see what God has done and to see how God is still bringing, hundreds and even thousands of teenagers to SOAR each year, each summer.
What I love is when you tell people what SOAR stands for, Sold Out and Radical. It is so early 90s.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That was cool. And it was awesome. But the name stuck, and the name has been a powerful thing because the conference has. I've seen young men, young women surrender to lives of ministry. We've had the chance to hear missionaries over the years. We've seen youth pastors and youth groups be crazy and goofy, and it's fun. But at the same time, we've seen the gospel shared. People have committed their lives to Christ. Just a powerful thing. For nearly 30 years, this conference has been going on, and it's a powerful thing. It's like the largest gathering of BMA Baptists in our country every year, and that's encouraging. Well, what is your personal history with the conference? I know that you're now the visionary leader, but how have you been involved over the years? Did you attend as a student? What was that like for you?
Yeah. So in 2005 was my first SOAR. Now I'm going to date myself, or actually show myself how young I am, but not really date myself. But in 2005, I was 15. I was a teenager. I grew up in a small BMA church in small town Arkansas, but I had no idea what the BMA was. I didn't know what SOAR was. Truth be told, Dan, when I went to SOAR for the first time, I went because a girl that I liked invited me to go. And I was like, here we go. This is awesome. And it was in Atlanta, Georgia. So talk about a bus ride. That was huge. And so we went all the way to Atlanta, Georgia, 2005 for SOAR. And man, what was really cool, and I don't say this in an over exaggerated way at all, is I went there for one reason, and the Lord, man, He used SOAR to really open my eyes to just the things that He is doing in the world around me. And man, I came back really just not fired up about SOAR, but fired about what God was doing. And it just opened my eyes. It was a catalyst for just opening my eyes. And I remember I was so excited about it that I came back to my small church, and I don't know where the boldness came from, other than just to say it came from the Lord. And I stood up in our next business meeting, and I just said, hey, I went to this conference called SOAR. Again, no idea that it was a BMA thing. And I just said, we need to go. We need to take a group next year. And somehow our church, they respected, and they were gracious enough just to allow us to be able to start going to SOAR after that. And so that started my journey of just kind of going to SOAR and being a part of SOAR. And man, it's just a great honor and privilege to be able to be in a leadership role now. And along with a lot of other great leaders in our association who are putting in a lot of time and prayer to what is making SOAR be what it is. So I love it.
It is, my personal history is in 2008, I started going to SOAR again, as I was a youth pastor of a church that SOAR was a part of the culture of the church. They had gone to this conference for many years. And again, with it being around for nearly 30 years now. And so I've been every year except 1 year within that time since 2008. And I went in 93 and then 96 as times with churches that I was at. And just, it's been so great to see how God has used it in all sorts of people's lives. And what I love is that really it's, even though it is put on by our group of churches, there's just so much value for others.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful conference. And I love seeing, students gather. And even if you go back to that, what is the value in Christian conferences for students? Man, seeing others that are your age as a student, seeing that many when you're at 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, it's incredible that all these people are here to worship God. And that is just that question that hangs in your mind. It's like, man, that's cool. I mean, my school is big and it's good, but man, this is incredible. This past fall, I had the chance to go to Fields of Faith at Farmington High, and there were probably 200, 300 students out there, maybe a little bit more. And that's exciting to see. But there's this huge difference between 200 to 300 and 1,500 and 2,000. And it's so encouraging, just, as you're a student in that age.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this, because there are a lot of good youth conferences out there. Mm-hmm. Most of them have great music. They're exciting. There's a lot of things that they provide that, we could just say, hey, I'm just going to take my student to this. What makes the SOAR conference unique?
That's a great question. I think the best way for me to answer that is just to know what we always come back to, what SOAR is always about. And it's our desire for SOAR to lead teenagers to learn, love, and live the mission of God. That's what we want to do. We want kids to learn what the mission of God is. We want them to love what God is doing in the world around them. And I would add to that, love their local church, because the church is the vehicle in which God is using to accomplish his mission. And then to live radical lives that are sold out for the mission of God. And so it's something that we always try to do. And it's in my mind constantly is I want the common question of, what is God's will for my life? Which it seems like, we've probably all asked that question before. And I know there are teenagers that are definitely asking that question right now. They want to know, what is God's will for my life? Who, right. and they usually mean, who am I going to marry? Where do I need to go to school? All those kind of things. And that's what they mean. But there's a lot better question out there. And the one that I want them to be asking, and the one that I believe SOAR leads teenagers to ask is, God, show me your will, show me your mission, and how can I be a part of it? That's a much better question to ask, I believe, is to recognize that God's already doing something in the world around us, and that the world around us does not actually revolve around us. And to know that God wants to include you and me in on his mission. I can't tell you how much of an impact that had on me as just a blockhead 15-year-old, from small town Arkansas who thought that, all I knew was the 400 people in the town that I grew up in. And then all of a sudden I was just kind of bombarded with this big picture of who God is and the fact that he is building a family of all kinds of people from all nations and languages and backgrounds, and he's been doing this since the beginning of time, right? And so when I came to SOAR, man, my eyes were open to that and just began expanding. And man, I have high hopes for that to continue happening in the lives of teenagers. And so I would say that is what's unique about SOAR is we focus heavily on leading teenagers to learn, love, and live the mission of God.
I love that. I do. That gives me a very clear picture of what the leadership is thinking and what they're hoping to accomplish. SOAR is a great conference. We've got it coming up this summer. And so I know that this year's theme is called Multiply. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So last year, it was one lost sheep, and it was talking about how Jesus pursues that lost one lost sheep. But the conference ended with this phrase and kind of this tone that it's never just about the one, that God is a God who is multiplying his followers, and he actually uses us to do that. And so that just naturally is what we have flowed into this year. And so we want to really focus on what it means to be a follower of Christ and to make followers of Christ. And so it's this idea of you've got to be one to make one, but to know that that God he wants to use us to multiply what I'm going to call these God glorifiers around us and in our community. I believe that God wants to glorify himself, and I believe that he's going to use teenagers and all other kinds of people to do that in their communities. And so really excited about the multiply theme.
That is great. Let me ask a few questions about the details for SOAR, because I know that's always the question. You talk about going to hear a specific speaker, what's the music like, things like that. So let's start there. Yeah. Who is our speaker, the primary speaker for this year's SOAR conference?
Yeah, his name's Andy Comer. Andy is the lead pastor at Antioch, Georgetown, down in Georgetown, Texas. He was our speaker last year, and like I've already said, he did such a great job of leading us into this idea that Jesus pursues the one. And so we just thought it would be great to have him back for one more year. And so he's excited to come. We have, as far as music goes, our band called SOAR Collective. And man, I love these guys because these guys are serving in our churches. They're pastors and they're worship leaders, and they love the local church, and they come together during these few days at SOAR and just do an awesome job of leading us in worship. And all that's going to be happening at the Gaylord Texan Resort there in Grapevine, Texas, July 1st through the 3rd. You didn't ask this, but I'm going to say it. We also have, because it's a, we've got a bunch of teenagers coming in one spot. We want to have some fun. And so we've got Flame coming to do a concert for us. And man, that's going to be fun. I know my kids are excited about Flame and getting to just be in that atmosphere with a lot of other people.
Well, there's a couple other things that I know that we've done over the years, and I've seen over the years at the SOAR conference. We have something called the SOAR Village.
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Oh man, Jason Pruitt, who heads up our Daniel Springs camp, he does an awesome job. He and his crew of volunteers setting up the village. I'll just say this: the village. I'm so glad it's there. We've had it before, and then it went away for a little bit, and we brought it back, and I'm just so glad it's there because I think that's a crucial part of teenagers loving the church and loving other people, because you get in a room and you just have a bunch of fun. That's what the Village is all about. It's just a big community room where sometimes we have huge inflatables, and they can just, rock and roll on those things. Other times it's just other stuff, depending on the space that we have. But what's always constant is community happens. And it's not just within our groups. It's actually where churches are having community with one another, and a lot of fun. So I love the Village.
Well, I know that some of my students over the years have they've met other students throughout our group of churches and, just at this conference, and then they would have a chance to interact with them during that time. The Village is open. It's a fun place. Yep. And again, I agree with you, Chris. I'm glad that that's a part of it. Now, there are a couple of other things that I'd like you to speak about. The one is our breakout groups. That's something that we've done in the past. And again, we haven't had them in the past, and it's kind of gone back and forth. But I really enjoyed what I saw last year. What are the breakout groups?
Oh, man. The breakouts, I believe, are crucial to what we want to accomplish with the SOAR conference. We're together in a hotel, for about 3 days. And so we want to really focus on teaching the Word of God in those main sessions. And the breakouts are where we're able to go even deeper. We get to teach kids how to lead a Bible study or start a Bible study in maybe in their band or in their basketball team, or maybe even just what it looks like to share the gospel with a friend. And so those breakouts, we have a wide range of topics, but they all undergird what we're trying to do in that short amount of time while we're together at the conference. And so I believe our youth pastors have really enjoyed them. And I found that our youth pastors are actually going to the breakouts with their kids, which I love. It just allows so much more conversation to happen among groups. And I believe that in a conference style setting, breakouts are, I'll just say it. I think they're necessary. I think they're and I'm glad that we have them. Noah Hill, who is one of our youth pastors in Oklahoma, man, he's leading that up this year, and I'm so excited. I've been talking to him, and he's got some great stuff to put out there for us this year.
Yeah. Well, I know that when we are listening in a big session, it's easy for a student, for an adult, to disengage at different points. But when you're in that smaller setting and you have people right there, and you maybe are hearing others ask questions, get involved, man, that is good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing happen was a prayer team develop. Mm-hmm. And that is something that we of course would love to see everybody at this conference, but perhaps you're an adult, you're not taking a group, you're listening today and you're thinking, well, I can't do anything because we don't go. You can become a part of that prayer team. Mm-hmm. We would love to have people praying for the conference leading up to it, praying during the events of that conference, and then even praying as students go back home, mm-hmm. as they are engaging in some of the things that they've been challenged with. Mm-hmm. Who leads the prayer team at our SOAR conference?
Her name is Kristen Riddle, and man, she is passionate about this, and I love it. That's what makes my role so much fun, is really just having people like Kristen who are gifted in this way, and who absolutely love what they're doing. And man, she does a great job leading our prayer efforts, prayer teams. And Dan, I'll say this, everything that you said is true. Praying before the conference is great. And I encourage, if anybody's listening to this and they want to be a part of that, man, just find us on Facebook or Instagram at SOAR Conference. Leave us a comment somewhere, and we can get you connected, with Kristen on how you can begin praying. But what's really cool is when the conference is going on, Kristen she just works her administrative magic, and she gets a room filled with youth leaders, volunteers, and anybody else who'll sign up. And while the sessions are going, while the breakouts are happening, even while kids are building relationships in the village, there are people praying specifically for those different things. And so, man, I absolutely love the prayer room. I love what Kristen is doing with it. And so it is one of those things that I'm so glad is a part of SOAR.
Well, we could probably sit here for another hour talking about SOAR.
Yeah.
As you can tell, Chris is passionate about it. I have loved it. I've seen how valuable it's been. And I know the men and women who are involved in putting it together every year. And it is a labor of love.
Yeah.
They care about students. They care about seeing them grow in their relationship with God. I know that you mentioned Facebook and Instagram. There is a SOAR conference account on both of those. There is also a website. What's the address for that?
It is gosoar.com. So GOSOAR.com. And it is a new site. And man, it looks sharp. Really cool. Got a countdown on there. So that kind of gives me some stress knowing that there's only, I think, 19 weeks until SOAR.
Oh, yeah.
But man, it's awesome. You can register there. You can sign up, go ahead and get a hotel, booked through that site. And so it's pretty powerful. But yeah, I encourage anybody to go check that out. And Dan, just not to take too much more time, but just to say this, that I know that there's going to be people listening to this that they're trying to figure out their summers. You're a youth leader and you're just like me. You're trying to schedule things out and communicate things to parents. And my encouragement to you is just to remember what we said at the very beginning is to know the value of camp, but then also of conferences, and I just encourage people to pray. I don't want to assume that SOAR is a one size fits all for everybody. I believe in it and I love it. I hope that kind of comes through this microphone that I'm speaking in. But I encourage people, a youth leader, man, pray what God would have you to do and where He'd have you to take your group. I know that if you come to SOAR, man, we're going to do everything that we can to lead your students to learn, love, and live the mission of God. And that excites me.
Well, it has been great to talk to you today, Chris, about SOAR and about all that we're looking at. I just, like I said, love the SOAR conference, love the leadership, and am excited about what God is going to do this summer. Well, on behalf of all of us at Student Ministry Matters, thanks for being with us today. We hope that you'll continue to join us as we seek to connect with other student ministry workers. So keep serving. I know that it's hard, but that's what God has called us to do. Let's embrace it together because student ministry matters.
Thanks for listening to the Student Ministry Matters podcast. Get connected at studentministrymatters.com or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Student Ministry Matters. Until next time, keep up the great work with your students because the work matters.